The tiger's muscles shivered beneath the skin, taut with effort and pain, each movement a fragile negotiation between instinct and exhaustion. He lowered himself onto his good limbs, his injured paw dragging slightly as he shifted position, ears flicking toward the slightest sound. A shiver ran along his spine as he pressed into the cold, wet earth, nostrils flaring, eyes scanning every shadow. The rangers remained patient, their bodies still, voices nothing more than gentle whispers against the hush of the mist-laden forest. "You're almost there," one murmured softly, not expecting a response, simply offering a presence the tiger could measure and perhaps trust. As he sniffed at the meat laid carefully before him, his jaws flexed slowly, tentative, the scent mingling with the pungent tang of blood and damp soil. Every inhale was deliberate, every step measured. A small bird landed nearby, oblivious, hopping along a branch, yet the tiger's gaze followed it, not with predatory focus, but alertness born of both instinct and vulnerability. The injury slowed him, the raw stretch of torn flesh quivering with each shallow breath. Occasionally, his tail twitched, brushing against fallen leaves, a subtle language of discomfort and indecision. The rangers moved even more cautiously, one kneeling, offering water from a shallow bowl. The tiger lowered his head, tongue flicking hesitantly, eyes never leaving the humans, calculating, sensing. His body trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from fatigue that weighed heavily, pressing against the slender strength of youth. The forest, misted and still, seemed to hold its own breath. Each rustle of leaves underfoot, each distant insect hum, punctuated the tension of a life poised between helplessness and the slow reclaiming of agency. Minutes stretched as the tiger gradually allowed closer inspection. The wound was crimson, a stark contrast to the gold of his fur, yet there was resilience in his stance. He shifted, flexing muscles along his back, testing the limits of pain, ears flicking forward at every careful step the rangers took. When one reached out a gloved hand toward the shoulder, he flinched but did not bolt, a small concession, a fragile trust. The rangers exchanged quiet nods, understanding that patience, not haste, would guide the way to safety. Even as they prepared a stretcher, the tiger's golden eyes never left them, wide and luminous, reflecting not only the pain of injury but the cautious calculation of a wild creature surviving in a world of unpredictability. The morning light strengthened, piercing through the mist and shafts that caught on his fur, illuminating the fine tremors that marked both fear and determination. Each movement was a delicate balance, each blink a reminder of the vulnerability that even a creature so powerful could feel. Eventually, he allowed the humans to help him to his feet, muscles trembling, paw dragging slightly, yet alive with an instinctual strength that refused surrender. The rangers stayed low, guiding, not forcing, their voices steady, their presence steadying. As they carefully led him away from the dense undergrowth, the mist began to lift, revealing the forest in gentle clarity. Every leaf shimmered with dew, every branch seemed to bow lightly in the early sun. The tiger, still wary but steadying, moved with the soft cadence of survival. A light breeze rustled the canopy, carrying distant calls of wildlife, and for a brief, suspended moment, the forest seemed to breathe with him. The tiger moved with a careful deliberation that seemed almost choreographed, each step a negotiation between instinct and curiosity. His paw, still tender, pressed into the soft earth, leaving shallow impressions in the damp soil. He sniffed each parcel of meat, inhaling sharply, assessing the human's intent, then settling back, body low, before daring another hesitant approach. The rangers remained still, their presence measured and unobtrusive, voices mere whispers carried lightly across the misty clearing. "Easy, easy," one murmured, barely above the rustle of leaves, a gentle reassurance that seemed to settle into the tiger's tense frame like a slow exhale. Time moved differently in the forest, stretching and folding as predator and human shared space without urgency. The tiger's movements were a study in cautious grace, ears swiveling at the slightest sound, tail twitching, eyes tracking each shift of shadow. Occasionally, a low, rumbling sound passed his throat, subtle and almost conversational, acknowledging the humans without aggression. Each approach to the food parcels was a decision, each retreat a quiet assertion of agency, until the distance between him and the rangers grew shorter with patient repetition. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, dappling the tiger's coat in shards of gold and black, highlighting the ragged fur along his flank and the slight tremor of his jaw. As he lay down to eat, each bite was measured, deliberate, revealing the duality of his nature, a predator constrained by injury yet undiminished in spirit. His tail brushed the moss-covered ground, a soft, rhythmic signal of wariness, a language the rangers learned to read without words. The forest seemed to acknowledge the shift, every bird and small mammal halting in quiet observation, the wind softening as though in respect for the fragile understanding unfolding beneath the trees. The tiger's eyes, luminous and wide, followed every subtle movement of the humans, gauging their patience and intentions. When one ranger crouched slightly closer, extending a hand without pressure, he froze, ears erect, muscles taut, before inching forward in a delicate dance of trust. The wound along his side remained raw, but his cautious proximity marked the beginnings of a bond neither force nor fear could establish. The rangers noted each small concession, the way his head dipped toward the food, the momentary flicker of softened gaze, the subtle easing of his posture. Even in stillness, the forest seemed alive with tension and tenderness intertwined. The tiger inhaled slowly, nostrils flaring, tongue flicking at the morsels, and each small rumble from his throat became a heartbeat of connection. Light filtered through the mist, touching leaves, bark, and fur alike, illuminating a moment of fragile peace between two worlds. "You're safe now, we won't hurt you," a ranger whispered, voice low and steady, not a plea but a covenant. The tiger's ears twitched in acknowledgement, gaze lingering on the calm figure before him, not with fear but a tentative acceptance. By late afternoon, he had edged close enough to allow the rangers to observe without interference. A quiet presence settled in the shared air. The injury still shaped his movements, but the bridge of trust had begun to form, woven with patience, care, and unspoken understanding. The clearing held its breath, and in that soft, sunlit silence, the beginnings of a bond, delicate, careful, and real, took root. The tiger's gaze softened for the briefest moment, a subtle recognition that safety could exist beyond instinct, and that in patience humans and predator could share the forest without compromise. The evening settled over the forest like a slow, amber tide, softening the edges of trunks and leaves and painting the clearing in muted gold. The rangers moved with quiet deliberation, carrying only what was necessary: antiseptic, bandages, and steady hands trained in care. The tiger's body remained coiled with tension, muscles taut under his striped fur, but he did not flee. He had learned, in measured hours of patience, that these humans did not rush, did not demand. His golden eyes tracked their approach warily, yet he allowed them to come closer, a fragile concession born of cautious trust. A soft hiss drifted from his throat as a hand neared the injury along his flank, more a signal of discomfort than aggression. The ranger paused, letting the warning settle before applying the disinfectant in slow, careful strokes, the cool liquid mixing with the coppery scent of blood and earth. Each touch was deliberate, a silent contract of reassurance, fingers hovering before contact, then pressing just enough to clean, never forceful. The bandage followed, wrapped loosely, leaving room for movement and breath, a gentle acknowledgement that healing required respect. The tiger trembled beneath the ministrations, muscles quivering with pain that radiated slowly along his limbs, a stark contrast to the quiet steadiness of the humans nearby. The ranger spoke softly, voices low and even, describing trivial moments of their day, ordinary words to fill the space without startling him. "Almost done, just a little longer." Each syllable carried calmness rather than instruction, weaving a thread of familiarity in the forest's dimming light. Around them, the forest shifted with the coming night. A cricket began its solitary song, high and rhythmic, and the breeze whispered through the canopy, brushing against wet leaves. A faint drizzle fell, dampening the forest floor, sending up the rich scent of earth and moss. The tiger's head lowered slightly, a subtle lean toward the human's careful touch, a quiet tolerance that marked the earliest signs of acceptance. Each measured motion, each careful movement stitched a fragile bond, one formed not by force but by shared patience, by the recognition that care could exist without threat. By nightfall, the tiger had taken a few more bites of meat, licking at the wound with instinctive care, his body settling gradually into the cool embrace of the forest floor. His breathing slowed, each exhale a rhythm between vigilance and trust. The rangers stepped back, maintaining a respectful distance, their eyes lingering on the stripes fading into the shadows as he curled into a guarded rest. The mist rose lightly, curling around his form, and the rain pattered softly on leaves, a gentle accompaniment to the fragile stillness. In the quiet space between predator and human, a delicate understanding had begun to root itself. Though tension remained, so too did acceptance, tentative and true, a bond carefully nurtured, visible in the subtle easing of muscles, the lowered ears, and the soft, watchful gaze of the young tiger as he drifted into the first hours of night. The morning mist clung to the forest like a soft veil, blurring the shapes of trees and making every rustle of leaves or distant bird call resonate with gentle clarity. The tiger stirred from his guarded rest, lifting his head slowly, muscles trembling yet determined. His paw pressed into the damp earth, testing the strength beneath the fur, and the wound along his flank, though tender and pink, showed the first signs of repair, skin knitting carefully, muscle beginning to respond with cautious intent. The rangers remained still, crouched at a distance that honored both safety and autonomy, their eyes following every deliberate motion. He rose fully, shaking his body lightly, the tremor of pain mingling with newfound vitality. The first steps were careful, unsteady, yet purposeful, each pawfall a quiet declaration of will, of instinct asserting itself above weakness. He paused mid-stride, nose lifted to the wind, ears swiveling for subtle sounds, and let out a low rumble, soft, brief, almost imperceptible, yet carrying a weight of relief and awakening. It was the first unguarded sound in days, a signal that survival was no longer mere hope but unfolding reality. The forest responded in kind. Birds flitted overhead, wings catching the pale light, while leaves shimmered with dew, brushing gently against one another in the early breeze. The scent of wet earth and moss rose in delicate spirals, mingling with the sharper tang of the tiger's own musk. Each step he took through this living cathedral of greenery reflected both fragility and resilience, the careful negotiation of strength regained and caution still present. Drawn toward a narrow stream, the tiger lowered his head and sipped with tentative curiosity, pawing at the shallow water to test its coolness. The ripple of droplets across stones, the hiss of water against earth, seemed to mark the rhythm of his tentative autonomy. When a ranger, moving slowly and deliberately, extended a hand, he paused, amber eyes flicking toward the figure. There was no submission in the gesture, only a quiet recognition, a brief acknowledgement of the help that had eased pain and nurtured recovery. His nose twitched, whiskers brushing against the offered fingers, and then he withdrew, shaking water from his fur but leaving the ranger reassured that trust, however delicate, had been given. Minutes passed with soft steps and careful exploration. Each movement was a measure of regained confidence. A stretch of the back, a low roll onto his side, a shake of his head to realign the ears. The once shallow tremors in his limbs lessened, replaced by deliberate control. He sniffed the earth, pressed into the underbrush and moved in small circles, testing the boundaries of space he now claimed again. The rangers observed without intrusion, providing sustenance but never forcing presence, their silence a quiet affirmation of respect. By mid-morning he had walked further than the previous day, head held higher, gaze sharper, yet still measured. The subtle rumble returned intermittently, a sound of reassurance and burgeoning strength, echoing faintly through the misted forest. Around him, life continued. Leaves shivered with the touch of wind, insects hummed in low choruses, and distant calls of birds punctuated the air with vitality. The tiger paused beside a sunlit patch of ferns, nose lifting to catch scents carried by the breeze, then crouched briefly as if savoring the moment. In that quiet, luminous morning, the rangers witnessed what felt miraculous yet entirely natural. A predator reawakening, moving from vulnerability toward recovery, carrying with him the fragile yet undeniable mark of trust. The bond that had formed in patience and respect revealed itself subtly, in a glance, a sniff, a rumble of contentment. The forest, misted and alive, seemed to hold its breath around him, honoring the quiet triumph of life persevering, one careful step at a time. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy in warm, golden shafts, striking leaves and undergrowth in shifting patterns that mirrored the tiger's own stripes. He moved with a supple confidence, each muscle flowing smoothly beneath his fur, stride measured yet unhurried, paws pressing into the soft earth with quiet authority. The wound that had once pinned him down was gone, replaced by strength born of care and the slow work of recovery. His ears flicked at the faintest sound, eyes bright and alert, scanning the forest with both curiosity and assurance. The rangers observed from a respectful distance, still and silent, their presence as unobtrusive as the shadows that danced across the ground. Words were unnecessary here. The forest itself seemed to honor the moment. The tiger paused at the edge of a fern-covered clearing, head turning slightly to glance back. It was not a look of thanks, but something deeper, a recognition of the quiet patience and careful attention that had allowed him to survive. In that brief pause, a bond, fragile, unspoken, yet undeniable, hung in the air, connecting human and wild through trust earned rather than demanded. Then, with a fluid motion that seemed to belong entirely to the forest, he stepped forward, moving among the ferns and underbrush, disappearing into the shifting shadows of trees and moss-covered trunks. Each step carried a grace born of regained autonomy, the the rhythm of survival marking his passage through the living cathedral around him. The faint sound of paw against root and leaf drifted back to the rangers, mingling with distant bird calls settling in for the night, a gentle symphony of the forest embracing one of its own once more. The sunlight softened as it fell, brushing against branches and pooling in quiet patches on the forest floor. The tiger's silhouette melded seamlessly with the hues of amber, green, and brown, a fleeting ghost of movement that held the attention long after he had gone. The rangers remained still, hearts swelling with a mixture of awe, relief, and reverence. The trials of injury, the slow work of healing, and the careful patience of trust culminated in this quiet reclamation, the return of a wild soul to its rightful realm. As dusk deepened, a subtle hush fell over the forest. Leaves whispered in the gentle wind, dew glimmered on the undergrowth, and the faint traces of pawprints marked the earth, reminders of resilience and careful care. The memory of his presence lingered, not as a spectacle but as a quiet truth, that even in a world of sharp instincts and survival, gentleness could coexist with strength, and patience could bridge the gap between human and wild. Night settled fully, folding the forest into shadow and starlight. Somewhere ahead, the tiger prowled, unseen but known, a testament to endurance and recovery. The rangers finally stepped back, letting the forest reclaim him entirely, carrying the image in their minds, the fluid grace of a creature restored, moving with quiet dignity. In that lingering silence, the echo of survival and the unspoken bond they had shared remained, etched softly into the hearts of those who had watched, a moment of profound respect and enduring memory.